Well, Sam Bankman-Fried's much-anticipated trial continues this week as the former FTX CEO takes the stand for a second day. Bankman-Fried testified for more than 5 hours Friday, admitting that he made, in his words, significant oversights. But he maintained he did not steal from customers or commit fraud. For more on where the trial stands, we're joined by Jarrod Loadholt, Ice Miller LLP partner. Good to talk to you today. So he's back on the stand this morning, but he was asked point blank by his own attorney, defense attorney, did you defraud anybody? He said, I did not. How convincing has his testimony been so far?
Not at all. The testimony, I think, has failed to really rebut what we've seen from all of the former executives that used to advise him, which he was very much aware, and in many cases, from what the prior testimony suggested, directed it. And so he's the only person who said he didn't do it. So I think we've kind of run into kind of a classic he said, she said. But, I think one of the things that I find the most interesting is someone who's kind of worked in and around FTX in the space. I've seen him be an incredibly engaged CEO on everything. And so the idea that, that much money was moving between FTX and Alameda Research, which I think is kind of at the core of this case, and he wasn't aware of it, is hard to believe. So we're looking forward to another day of testimony, but it's what I've heard from him thus far has not been that compelling or persuasive.
I mean, you're looking at some of the testimony here, SBF saying that he worked 23 hours a day as FTX was melting down. And also, obviously, some of his inner circle there really sort of throwing them under the bus, particularly Ellison there saying, it was more of an oversight issue, that he should have perhaps had better oversight, but that the intent was not there to defraud anyone, that it was more of a mistake. How do you think that's going over with, especially the jury? How's that being received?
I have a hard time seeing a jury coming to the same conclusion. I think everyday folks in their minds like, hey, if I lose $1,000 in my household, I know it, or 5,000, 10,000. So I think the everyday person on a jury is probably not going to believe one person when every person used to work for them has been cooperating witnesses, down to his ex-girlfriend who used to run Alameda. And she's been pretty unequivocal about this. And it's, again, look, I see the graphic there, Gary Wang, who's the former CTO, who talked about how, he was giving Mr. Bankman Fried the code so that Alameda had basically special access to customer funds. And so it's not clear to me how he's defining defrauding, but I think the bank records, there's ample emails. I mean, he looked for a general counsel who had, prior experience around money laundering cases. And I think there were memos that suggested that, how could he legally justify customer funds not being in the where customers thought they would be. So again, the evidence seems to me to be overwhelming. I don't see any world where his testimony can overcome not only the testimony of former executives, but I mean, ample written documentation too. So I highly doubt that what he says will kind of move jurors or any other reasonable person on that.
Yeah, I mean, elaborate on that a bit, because anytime you have the defendant take the stand, it points to some risk for the defense. Have we learned anything new as a result of Sam Bankman-Fried testifying?
No, I think what you have is him rebutting what we all thought to be true, but his rebuttals aren't compelling, right? Because usually if there's ample testimonial evidence and documentary evidence, then there's usually some testimonial and documentary evidence to the contrary if you're trying to rebut the same that came from literally every person who used to work for him. I don't think we've learned much new other than he didn't think he defrauded people, but I don't think his definition of defraud is going to carry the day. I think it's going to be a fact finding by the jury that what he did was in fact legally defrauding customers and investors who never thought that the money that they were investing in the exchange would end up in some affiliated hedge fund that in turn would be, end up in his pockets or, political contributions and so forth. So I've yet to see anything from his testimony that will overbut the volume of evidence to the contrary of what he's claiming in his testimony.
So, Jarrod, when people look back at this case and they talk about the repercussions, obviously at the beginning it was all about crypto and, his relationship with Binance's CZ and, There was a lot of drama around it, but when it comes down to it, this is about money laundering. What do you see the repercussions being for the crypto industry and perhaps future cases that come? Will they be compared to SBF, or would you think it will sort of stand alone?
I think what we have with SBF is really kind of standard money laundering and fraud, and the systems, I think, work in the way that it should. The repercussions, though, downstream, I think, are significant in terms of reputational damage to the digital asset industry, particularly as Congress and regulators are still kind of mapping out what that regulatory framework will look like. And I think, unfortunately, the legitimate players in the industry are going to be lumped in with Mr. Bankman Fried and FTX for the foreseeable future. And I think that is probably the most damaging, in that what happened really didn't have anything to do with the underlying digital assets or crypto, but around these affiliated entities and money that, or, these are investor dollars ending up in the wrong hands, which is very classic textbook fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. These are all the things that are pretty straightforward, that I don't think really, in fact, kind of speak to these issues around crypto, but they'll be lumped in. Because I think for the average member of Congress and regulator, they will often look at the industry and paint with a broad brush and not just look at this case.
I mean, with that said, there's certainly been criticism about just how slow Congress has moved, regulators have moved in shaping crypto regulation. Now that we've had several weeks to process the information coming out of this trial, do you see any situation where regulation could have prevented what happened?
No, not this, because this is just regular fraud. That doesn't mean, though, that you shouldn't still be doing what Congress, the SEC, and other regulators are doing. And so fraud already has a fix. Unfortunately, it's after the fact, and it's what you're seeing right now. But I don't think there would have been anything that would have required them to have, again, basic risk management. But at the end of the day, if your CEO has decided that he wants to move money from one entity to another, there aren't really a whole lot of federal laws that can stop that, especially when what we're talking about, again, is just kind of standard fraud and money laundering. We have laws in the books for those, and those are being enforced now. But I think in terms of what Congress is doing, it always takes time for, I think, Congress to regulate. Now, the SEC has, the CFTC has, and the FTC has, I think. So you've seen the executive branch a lot more active. I think sometimes we have very Congress-centric conversations about regulation, but in fact, the policymaking is happening via regulation now. So we're already seeing Washington act, but in this particular case, I don't think you would have, any of the things that are on the table in Washington now would have stopped regular fraud. And candidly, we have laws in the books that deal with that right now.
It certainly didn't help that the SEC and others were looking to SBF to help guide them in some of this regulatory framework as well. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Jarrod Loadholt, Ice Miller LLP partner. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.